Welcome to the Love is the Cure Foundation podcast. I'm Alfonso Vega.
And I'm Lyndell Vega.
We are your hosts for today's conversation. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Carly Campbell. Carly was one of Inigo's nurses on the Neuro-Oncology floor at Boston Children's Hospital. Beyond being a wonderful nurse, the connection that Carly had with Inigo was special. Whether Carly was assigned to Inigo for the day or had different assignments, she always took the time to connect with him, making their bond truly special. We want to delve into the topic of unique connections nurses can form with their patients, especially in the oncology space. This added level of care is crucial to emphasize. Welcome, Carly, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Carly, just to start off today, tell us a little bit about what you do and what has inspired you to be a nurse.
Okay, so I am a nurse on the, as you said, the neuroscience unit. So we see patients and with who need doctors who specialize in neurology, epilepsy, neurosurgery, and neuro-oncology. And I haven't always worked in this space in pediatrics. I started in adults, but similarly in adult neuroscience and a stroke step-down unit before I made my jump to children's. And thinking about what inspires me to be a nurse, I think first and foremost, it's the kids. I always knew I wanted to work with kids. I had two parents that were teachers, and I was like, I don't think I want to be a teacher. I don't think that's where I'm supposed to be. And for a long time, I was just kind of in limbo. Like, I know I want to work with kids. I know kids are so special to me, but how can I work with them in a different way? And and I guess getting a bit vulnerable right off the bat here, but as a high schooler, I found myself admitted to the hospital with liver disease, and I think that I was only there for a short time, way less time than any was inpatient, but in those few days in the hospital and then traveling back and forth for appointments for the end of my high school career really had me like, I think this is something I'm interested. I think this space is where I can meet my two interests, my interest with kids and now this new interest of medicine and helping people. So here we are. I hope that made sense. But
No, that's great. And yeah, we thank you for sharing that. We can just tell that you have something special in you when you're around kids. Like Alfonso and I would look at each other and we'd be like, she has found her niche. Like she works so well with kids. The way you would engage Inigo when you come into the room, you'd ask him about, what he was working on at the time. You would just immediately find some way in to engage him and talk to him and have a conversation with him. And that we felt was so important in a pediatric nurse. We know that a lot of pediatric nurses do this. They have these tips and tricks on how to engage kids because, when kids are in the hospital, they get scared, they close up, they don't want to talk to anybody, but you have a special gift. And this is exactly why we wanted to talk to you specifically today, because you have this special quality about you to help kids open up and, just feel a little bit more relaxed in their environment when they have to be in the hospital. And like you were saying, you've had this experience when you were young in the hospital, what it felt like for you. So we can see that empathy in you and how you share that with your patients. And it's just great. So the next question I have here for you is, Alfonso and I know firsthand as parents of a child with brain cancer that neuro-oncology is an emotionally intense hospital unit and full of devastating and life-changing diagnoses, each with its own list of heart-wrenching losses and changes. So it's important to point out that though we as parents have not chosen this emotional journey that we're on, our care team has in some respects. They show up every day. They may not be personally experiencing the pain, but they see it and they constantly acknowledge it. And the gift of their choice helps us realize that we're not bearing this alone without compassionate, caring people by our sides. So, Alfonso and I often wonder, like, who would choose to put themselves in these situations at work every day? Like, oncology is very challenging, even as a healthcare provider, as a nurse. So, what is so different about these people that has them showing up every day to this job? So, how do you keep returning to do the work and caring for families like Alfonso and I and Inigo?
Yeah. I think the answer to who chooses to do this is it's a tough one, but I think it's someone who cares a lot. We care so much about these kids and these families that we take care of, and I'll admit myself, and I think some of my coworkers as well have some struggles with emotional boundaries, but um, we just see a little bit of ourselves and our family and our loved ones in these families and patients in the hospital, and we want to provide the care that we would hope to receive if one of our loved ones was in the hospital, if one of our loved ones experienced this, the unthinkable, you don't you don't realize those things happen until it's happening to you. And I think even as a new nurse, I didn't realize some of these things happen until I was there, and I was like, oh, like this is how life works. Like you really get a reality check, I think, in the hospital.
Yeah, so nurses and the healthcare staff there definitely have to go through that process in one way or another too. The shock of it all, of being in that space.
Yeah. I think new nurses especially go through that when they're, newly out of school and on the floor, whatever floor it may be. For me, it was an adult neuroscience unit, but it's a little bit shocking at first. I remember going home every day and like not having a great outlook on things because I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, all of my grandparents, my parents, they're going to end up having a stroke and they're going to end up on this unit, or like it takes a little while to get out of that and realize that no, there are still healthy people out there. It's but it's an adjustment for sure.
Something that you said that I think is really interesting. Your parents are teachers. Mm-hmm. And I believe we've had conversations that your dad is a art educator. And we can go back to talk about how you decided that teaching wasn't for you. And I think something that all adults do, or kids in college, is we feed off of our parents. I think that's really interesting, but I want to highlight your dad is an art educator, and what we saw in the interactions that you had with Inigo is you brought that into your nursing.
Yeah.
And for a little boy that's super into art, super artistic,
ultra creative,
yeah, and then also very emotionally intelligent, you and him had this connection. So even though you didn't want to maybe go into teaching, we have always found it such a blessing that Inigo had a nurse that met his needs artistically. And we love that. Can you talk a little bit about exactly that? How you, I don't know your father, obviously, I don't know your connection with him.
Yeah.
But you clearly brought something from him into this space. And I think that's really special. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think it took me a little while to realize how important creativity was to me, because it was having my dad be an art teacher. I think it was just always in our house growing up. Like we always had art supplies. We always had paintings that he painted around the house and different things. So it was always very accessible. And when I grew up and got out of the house and I was like, why am I so sad? Like, what the heck is going on? And I'm realizing, like, oh yeah, you're not doing anything creative. Like, where's the creative anything like that? Because I was working, as a new nurse, and you're doing medicine all day, and it's kind of rigid, I guess one would say. And I was realizing, I'm feeling a bit down. And so giving myself access to those creative outlets really helped me a lot as a new nurse. And then I think what we as nurses do, the smart nurses, I guess, the nurses, we try to meet our patients where they are. And sometimes that's a little more surface area. That's a little more like, I'm recognizing that this parent's coping mechanism is being a bit distant from the bedside. And so what I'm going to do as the nurse is, like, I'm going to make sure I'm in here doing all the diaper changes, asking them if they want to be involved, but recognizing the boundary of, like, we're not going to push this because their coping is distance. Those are a little more surface area, but then sometimes you just meet a kid who you can line up with them a little bit more. And I saw a lot of myself in Inigo in the interest in art. And maybe I'm misspeaking, but Inigo liked rules. He liked to follow the rules, and he was very conscientious of them. And I was the same way as a kid. And I think art gave me a little bit more freedom. And just seeing that in Inigo, then I was like, okay, this is a level I know very well. Like, this is the level I could meet him at. So, it's all the levels are a bit different, but it's nice when you have one that's so familiar to you.
We always appreciated that we saw you were a person that looked deeper. I think in very many ways, oncology nurses, and I could be wrong on this too, I think all of you understand the outcomes that you're dealing with on the neuroscience floor. And Lindy and I appreciated the nurses on that floor, because you all do seem to understand an outcome, but also understand that until that outcome, there's a child there that needs care beyond medical care. Mm-hmm. And for a medical team to go beyond, and it's almost holistic in how you all deal with things. And we just loved the connection that you had with Inigo in particular, because you did, and maybe it's our educator in you, the art therapist in you below the surface, that connected with his needs. We appreciate that you say that you could see some of your characteristics in him. And for Lindy and I, it showed in how you cared for him. One experience that we talked about, and I'm just going to tell a short story here, but so for parents listening, on the neuroscience floor, you have your own room. Your child has their own room, and it's just you in there with your child. And you kind of get to make the rules, but not really. What I mean by that is you have therapies that you need to go through, whether your child is going through chemo or whether they are going next door for radiation. Some of the different therapies that they have to go through, your child will be tired and will need rest. And because of that, you get to make certain rules. Our room, the Vega's room, very many times was a revolving door. We had a lot of people coming in and out of our room constantly. And it was enjoyable for us because we knew that people appreciated us as beyond what we all were trying to do for Inigo. People enjoyed interacting with us. Yeah. And so we think that that was special. But we also know that at certain times, Inigo was over it. He was over the revolving door of the Vega's room. And Carly came in. She wasn't his nurse that day, but she came into the room and she, Inigo, as she always did, Inigo, as she walks through that door. And Inigo's eyes would light up and, hi, Carly, and they would start to talk and they'd have whatever interaction they were going to have. But this particular day, she came in because it was a revolving door that day. We had a lot of people coming through to see us, and he was very tired. He was going through radiation, spinal radiation at the time. And Carly came into the room and she said, Amy, I think I want to help you make a sign for the door. And Inigo understood that to mean, awesome, we're going to make a do not disturb sign for the door. I like that. And so then Carly took the time to talk to him about what he would want for his sign on the door. And we thought it was just so sweet. And I'm going to put some pictures up so that you all can see what I'm talking about. But Carly sat there with Inigo and designed a sign for the door that said do not disturb. And I believe with Inigo's
sleeping.
Yeah, with Inigo's instruction, it was a dung beetle.
Yeah.
And the dung beetle had a big ball of dung.
Yeah.
And it said, please do not disturb dung beetle sleeping. I think it said something.
Or said, shush, I'm sleeping.
Shush, I'm
and
sleeping.
the little beetle
made a play on bug. I think it said, don't bug me, I'm sleeping.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we were like, what kind of bug should we put on here? And he was like, a dung beetle, of course. I was like, okay, I've never drawn a dung beetle, but I will try.
Absolutely. So I have that. I'll pop that up on screen too so that everyone can see it. But it was such a wonderful interaction that we saw. And like I said, this is where our educator comes in. This is where your dad and you, or whatever it is, just Carly. Maybe this just the amazing person that you empathy. Are. But you met him where his needs were. He was tired and exhausted. You saw that. But you still went into the space that you knew he would love, which was this little space of mischievousness, this space of, I would like to have some control over my situation. That control is going to involve some art, some comedy to it. And for the rest of the time, I think for about 3 months, until we finished this part of his journey, we used that on his door. Mm-hmm. Until we left. It was a dung beetle. And so I can't tell you how many people would come in, because medical people are really, really smart. And then also, how do I say this in the most judicial and kind way? They're smart.
Say it for
But then if it's out of their purview, they don't really understand. And so the dung beetle was out of many people's purview. They didn't understand.
What is this bug you have on your your door?
They didn't understand it. This big dung beetle pushing a big ball of dung with its hind feet. And people didn't get it. And he also found that hysterical that here these people that can save kids' lives needed to have an explanation of what this bug was. And he thought that was great because it caught them in their wisdom, I guess is the best way I can put it. But so that was a huge characteristic of who you are that we appreciated and Inigo appreciated. Someone that could connect with him, that could meet him where his needs were. Because I think in very many ways you have that little mischievousness in you. You have that little subversive comedy within you where someone doesn't understand that, that you might be doing, I don't know, intellectual circles around them with your comedy or your art or your whatever the case is. And it's one of the stories that we think back upon and have such warm emotions for, with how you in particular connect and have emotional understanding of what your patients are going through and helping them to redirect what they may be feeling that day because of art. It's wonderful that you can do that.
It is above and beyond. Like, we expect all of our nurses on the oncology unit to be nice, sweet, caring people, but yeah, you really do just take it beyond what's expected.
Thank
So,
you. I it's really interesting to hear all of this. I'm kind of like realizing things now, but art has given me a little bit of a freedom. I think that we just talked about that being that for Inigo as well in some ways, and it gives you control. Like it, and sometimes in instances where you don't have control, and I like to incorporate it when applicable to kids, when they will when they understand it and whatever, use art or creativity to give them a little bit more control in these situations they don't have control of, even if it's just like, as we're going to listen to Post Malone while we go over to radiology, because like, we don't have a choice if we go get, you know, our testing or whatever today, but we do have a choice how we get there. Like, let's take the long way and listen to Post Malone, and like I think that helps kids get through some of these things, realizing that there's some things they have control over still. But
yeah.
Yeah, you jog memories. We remember you playing Inigo, what do you want to listen to on the way over to radiation today?
yeah,
And, you know, I don't know, it was the Black Pumas or something.
Get all the nurses dancing and pushing him down the hall.
fun music taste for sure. And then I tried to show him a song one day, and he said he didn't like that one. And I was like, all right, valid. I like that we're open enough with each other that, you could tell me you didn't like the Earth, Wind and Fire song.
Mhm.
Not into it.
Wait, which one was it?
I don't
I do
remember.
remember.
It was Earth, Wind and Fire. It was it's
Oh,
a
yes.
star. You shine star.
Oh, was it? Okay.
That's right.
He was like,
Yeah.
no. And I was like, maybe we're just not feeling that today. Maybe we need we're not feeling like a shining star.
No, the really wonderful thing about Inigo is that he was when he was really little, he was a contrarian. Whatever you would say, you go back to saying he's a rule follower. He was a rule follower because we instilled in him an understanding that for us to have a good functional home, we all had to play our roles, and certain things are expected of us. Outside of that, you could do whatever you want. It was one of those very free things. But there were certain things like having respect for one another, lots of stuff like that. And what he did as a little guy was really develop a streak of contrarianism that was really funny and really sometimes hard for a parent who's trying to teach a child, because he would say something contrarian and it would be so funny. But here you are knowing, like, I can't laugh at this because it needs to be a teaching moment.
Yeah.
Where, no, buddy, we're all on the same team. We got to, And so I think so many times with you, he had this response of, no, I don't, Carly, I don't like that. And then you'd leave the room, and all of a sudden we'd be jamming like Earth, Wind, and Fire, or like somebody that you had suggested that he initially would go, Carly, I don't know about that. I don't think I'm into that. It's not my thing.
I like it.
Yeah, I guess it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Well, I think you said something important. Children do need to know that they have some control through this moment. And sometimes the best control that you can have is over the fun things that you get to be involved in. And yeah, I love that you do that for kids. And we would hear it all the time as you're, wheeling somebody next door or to treatment or whatever, playing some sort of music. And that's just, it's really wonderful connectivity that you have with your patients, so that they can understand you may not have control of anything else, but for the fun stuff, you absolutely have control. Yeah. And you should embrace that. And you really allowed Inigo to it was an extension of what we were trying to do for him in that room. And it's wonderful that you, as the person in charge of his medical needs for that day or something, made sure that he understood that. And I think it's a special thing that you all do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's selfishly, it's also for me, like as a medical provider, you're not, as the nurse especially, I'm not in control of a lot of things. I'm taking orders from doctors. I'm being told what test to take the patient to. I'm maybe being asked by the parent for different things. So I'm just doing what others are asking of me kind of all day. And the thing that I also have control of is the fun parts of the room. So if the kid and I are in agreement that we want to do the Elmo slide 6 times in a shift, we're going to do the Elmo slide 6 times that day. Like, we have time to do that. You and I are in control of that. And you can't control outcomes. You can't control test results or the MRI machine, breaking down that day, but you can control, your mood and how you're going to take that day and how much fun we're going to have or not have. So, might as well.
That's awesome. Okay. So, speaking about like emotional distress that, patients are having and how you are relieving them of this stress, what are other common types of stress that you're seeing in your patients besides, just fear, of course, like breaking them out of that shell in order to loosen up and to enjoy themselves in some way for that moment or that day? What are other types of stress that you're encountering?
We see lots of stress. I think it's the challenge of being humans, working with humans, is that there's all different layers all around. So some of it is fear of maybe a medical diagnosis, but some of it is interpersonal dynamics between maybe 2 parents that are separated, but they're here for their child, or worries about financial burden for a lot of families. Medical care in the United States is not cheap. It's not cheap anywhere, and that definitely adds a layer of stress to people. There's also like the hospital logistics, like I mentioned before, like you can't control when equipment's not working or when tests are delayed, or the trauma case kind of cuts you in line for the OR that day. And so there's a lot of stress coming from a lot of different directions. And I think as a nurse, we have to step back and see all of that, but also try to bring our patients a little bit back down. Like we don't want them to be overwhelmed by that broad picture, but like trying to walk them through some of those stressors and those challenges.
One of the things that we looked into as we were researching, talking to you, and once again, I'll reiterate for everybody, any parents listening, but we wanted to talk to Carly specifically because she is a nurse that also was very involved with an emotional connection with Inigo. And from what we understand, it's not just Inigo. This is who you are with your patients. And that's what we find wonderful, is that we weren't getting special treatment. This is simply who you are. This is your personality. And that is really good for parents to understand, is you're going to have nurses that are more about being intermediary between your child's care and your child's medical team. And then you may, because all nurses are different, you may find a nurse that is fulfilling that same role, but then also does something more. And this is in particular why we find talking to Carly important. One of the things that has just been happening in the last, which is odd that this is a new study coming out, but so the National Library of Medicine put out an article actually in just in January of 2024 about these new studies that they have been doing about oncology nurses' experiences of providing emotional support for their patients. For some reason, this isn't something that all along has been important. But now teams are starting to understand, because of the emotional stresses that come with a cancer diagnosis in particular. So you have a traumatic situation, your child breaks their leg, or any myriad of things. The outcomes are going to be relatively short, even if your child deals with orthopedic situations for the rest of their lives. When it comes to a cancer diagnosis, you're dealing with something that is lifelong or life shortening. And because of those, especially if you have a child that, in Inigo's case, is diagnosed what we would consider out of the blue with a rare brain tumor that actually is not rare. It's actually the most common type of childhood cancer at the moment. The emotional effect on him, sometimes we talk about the effects of posterior fossa taking away some of that emotion because he wasn't really able to deal with it in a deep way. But for a child that was emotionally intelligent, as he started to come out of posterior fossa in a way that he could be more cognitively connected, the emotions hit him probably about 5 months into his case. And we came home from Spalding rehabilitation, and he started to talk again for the first time in all these months. And as he was talking, we started to realize he's starting to understand the gravity of this situation. It had been pretty heavy for those first 4 to 5 months because of how medically fragile Inigo was right after tumor resection surgery. But the emotions of it was something that hadn't shown up yet. And so here we are 5 months in, and the emotional depth of what he is going through become a lot more. It moves up into a different level. And so one of the things that we started to look into, for instance, as we were preparing for this, is, are nurses being trained to deal with the emotions of their patients? And it seems like it's a fairly new study that got put out. One of the things that we talk about is in this study is the high percentage of cancer patients who experience emotional distress. Oncology nurses are expected to play an important role in recognizing emotional distress and planning and delivering care that meets the individual needs of patients. However, few studies have focused on the experience of clinical nurses in such cases. So we want to understand from you, on the neuroscience floor, is it something that you all talk about, or is it more just a natural occurrence, especially with growing experience? In other words, the longer that you're a nurse, the easier it is to understand emotional needs versus a nurse that is fresh into the situation and really is more simply about caring for the medical.
Yeah, I think probably the first. So I would say as you, as a nurse, become more comfortable with the medical aspect of things, you become a little bit more confident in your nursing judgment and understanding, trusting yourself to recognize when something is wrong. Then you can start tuning into the emotional side of things. But with that said, it's definitely not something we're taught about in school. I think there's more talk about it now. Actually, in my global health work, I've been looking into nurse burnout and that realm of things. And there's also studies that some of my coworkers at Boston Children's have been working on about PTSD in nurses. And so some of these traumatic events for our patients are, secondhand, just as traumatic for the nurse. And so we're all talking about those things now and how we can protect ourselves, how we can prepare ourselves, how, nurses can live and work through a career of this kind of stuff instead of we have a lot of nurses now are burn out and then leave the profession because it's too much emotionally on them. So yes, definitely not something we're trained to do, but I think there's a lot more discussion about it now, and hopefully it's a growing area.
Yeah.
I know it's something that affected us, especially at the end of Inigo's life. I felt I would, as you know, I would sleep in the parking garage sometimes because I refused to leave Inigo and Lindy and come home. Of course, we had a dog at home that we had to take care of sometimes, and but I know I would in the morning I'd be coming upstairs bringing Inigo smoothies or Lindy a coffee or whatever it is that she needed a smoothie too. Inigo liked his coconut chocolate smoothies in the morning, and at the very end, I would walk down that hallway in the morning, and I would meet eyes with some of your colleagues, the MPs on the floor, and I could see you all have emotional pain for me. And I really appreciated the empathy, clearly. But I felt so emotional about putting all of this onto you all. That's something that Lindy and I have always discussed, is that we understand that you take this on as a role, and it is something that you have all chosen to do by the goodness of your hearts, we believe. But man, it would just break me up, thinking about how what was this moment going to do to all of you. And I know that our connections with all of you are real. They're not made up. Well, I can read people pretty well. And I really felt for all of you as this was coming towards the end. What one person in particular, I walked onto that floor and I'm making my way in there. And this was a few weeks still before Inigo had passed away. And this person saw me and was clearly emotional. And I said, "It's okay." I said, "It's okay. We've known this was coming. It's okay." And I hugged her, and she said, "I don't know how you guys do it." And I just said to her, "Well, we have no choice. It's just one of those things." But I feel exactly what you're talking about is so necessary for the general public to understand that you all have feelings, that you all have emotions, that you all go through these cases, and you will develop PTSD. You will develop connections with families that, when that child passes, is going to be destructive to you in some way, shape, or form. And I think we as a general populace need to understand that though you all and your jobs are to give us care, that we need to be empathetic to the emotions and the connections that you all are going to have with our kids and are going to feel as you help us walk our kids through the different stages of their care. And I thought it was interesting as we came across these studies where they're finally starting to do studies and tests on how oncology nurses in particular meet their patients' emotional distress. And I couldn't help but think that there's nothing in this article from the NIH that discusses how nurses are receiving the care that they need from what they've received. And so I just think it's interesting. Lindy and I talked about, well, because that's not the focus of these things. The focus is still on patient needs. I know you spoke a little bit about it, but what therapy do you all need after you go through situations, because you do become connected to families and their children?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to say that like it's very aware of you to notice that emotion and the pain that the caregivers are, the nurses, the healthcare team is going through. But it's not all families are at a point where they can comprehend that. And I think we as the healthcare workers we understand that. We understand that like you're going through a really traumatic time, and comparatively, like you can't comprehend at all right now that maybe this stranger has feelings about your child. But yeah, so I appreciate that, and I also know that sometimes that's just not possible. But as far as therapies go, a lot of us nurses choose to go through our own like personal therapy outside of work. There's supports through the hospital, which I'm very grateful for the privilege that working for a hospital like Boston Children's Hospital, they have staff resources, staff therapy programs. So those are great. Then outside of that, not formal therapy, but something I've been looking into. So they're saying in these studies to prevent PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, you want to gain psychological capital. And so looking at how we can gain psychological capital, and maybe that's through your hobbies, maybe that's through your interpersonal relationships, maybe that's through religion for some people, any way that you can increase your psychological capital so that you can equally combat the likelihood of becoming burnout or getting PTSD from your job, from your care. I don't know if I answered that fully, but if I missed anything, feel free.
There was a lot there. The reason why I asked that is because we can't afford to lose you all. And I understand that this is especially after the pandemic, we've had major nurse burnout, we've had major medical care burnout, and as parents to an oncology patient child, we can't afford to lose good people. And so I just wonder, just for the general public to understand that you are all real people. You're not just medical robots, and your children need people like Carly. And I just want, I think it disturbed us most when we would see parents angry at the nurses or angry at the care. We also understand that there are major emotions that we all as parents are going through with your child having cancer and dying, or a lot of that. We just like to make a call to parents that you all are on our team, and the more that we can involve you in our space and taking care of our child, the better it's going to be for all of us. And to understand that you all are going through things that are affecting you as well. And I appreciate that you said that a lot of us don't have the space to see that. And I get that. I understand that. Lindy and I are a bit weird. One of the things that we decided to do from the very beginning is make sure that you all understand that you were a part of us, and enabling you all to understand that you were part of us, we felt would give Inigo the best care, because it would enable you to be freer in engaging with him. And we knew the type of kiddo that Inigo was. He wanted people to engage with him. He was highly aware of everything that he had lost. But what we did is we decided we wanted to make a community of all of you because you're what we had in that space. And we have always felt that that's highly important for your child, for you as a parent to understand. Make a community of wherever you are. Wherever, if you're outpatient therapy, you can do that there too. If you're inpatient with your doctors and your nurses, make a community of it because it's necessary. It's necessary to get good care, to get
And for
good
safety.
Yep.
They'll know you very well and what your preferences are and what your needs are so that those things can be met in a timely fashion. And
it creates a positive space.
Yeah.
And I think, Carly, you could speak to this, but a positive space in a room that you walk into with a child is a much better space to deal with.
We're so appreciative for families like you guys. It's very obvious that your family was very special to us, and that is because of your openness with us and your willingness to maybe understand that we don't have control of everything. So we, sometimes anger or frustration is a very normal feeling to have with some things that happen in the hospital, but that often the nurse or even the physician isn't in control of what you're frustrated at. And but it's much easier, and maybe ease isn't the right direction to go, but it's I would just say it's more likely that you're going to receive the best care if the room is positive. If the nurses or the physicians are feeling stressed because of maybe misdirected frustration or anger, then it's more likely that more mishaps could happen, or So, and we try to protect ourselves against that and kind of like deflect a little bit and like, okay, they're just frustrated because of X, Y, and Z, and not let that affect us. But that's like what I said earlier, we're humans taking care of humans. And sometimes it's impossible to deflect something fully out of your practice, your care.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't have asked for better allies through Inigo's experience. We just felt like you guys were on our team every day. Each day you came in, and that was a very comforting feeling for us too. But again, like I said, the family has to be open to that. And if the family's not open to that at that time, that's okay. You're in a different place, and maybe you'll get to the point one day where you'll want to be, have that openness there in the relationship with the staff. But again, you need to do what you need to do to protect yourself, to care for yourself.
Something I just want to make this point. Something I really appreciate about all of you is the longer we were with you all, we would get new nurses that were coming in. What I appreciated was no one tried to force it. No one tried to force their connection with us.
Yeah.
We did get a few nurses. Oh, you guys are the Vegas. I've heard so much about you. We heard that common line, which was fine. It was great. It was great to know that, we always hope you heard good things, but we did appreciate that no one tried to force their interaction with us, knowing that we were a very open family when it came to Inigo's care.
Yeah.
So back to it. Once again, we want to reiterate just a couple things before we go into some of the final things that we want to talk about with you, Carly. But I want to reiterate with parents that are listening, the nurse, patient, and you as a parent relationship is really important. It's important on the medical side, but we're talking to Carly specifically because it's important on the emotional connectivity side. If possible, talk to your kids and enable them to understand that their nurses are a safe space for them. Their nurses want to engage them. I don't know about any other floor, but we do know about the neuroscience floor, and the nurses on that floor are absolutely nurses that want to emotionally engage your children on a different level. We're talking to Carly because she, for us, is the flag bearer for that on that floor. We feel, which for any of the nurses that are listening out there, we love you too. You guys are all awesome.
But, you're right along with her.
Yeah, right? You guys. Yeah. But it's important for parents to understand, if you can, you're not going to force the relationship, but enable your children to understand that they can emotionally connect with their nurses. Yes, that's going to be difficult long term, especially if things do not turn out the way that you want as a parent. Understand that it's difficult for the nurse, just as it is for you and your child. But it's an important connection to have. It's an important connection to have because your child will realize that they've lost so many connections out there in the world. And sometimes your last line of emotional connection, and dare I say love, and dare I say, I'll just leave it at love, are your nurses. And that's why we're talking to Carly, because we absolutely appreciate that she saw that, she walked straight through it and understood, this kid needs emotional connection. He needs my care, my love, and I'm going to do it through art, and I'm going to do it through guitars. Carly would always bring guitars into the room.
Make up funny songs with Innie.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Or funny names for
all his stuffies.
He had a stuffy that we would heat up in the microwave. That the nephrology team had brought him, warm. And he's full of flax seeds, and you could heat him up in the microwave so he gets really warm, because as your child goes through radiation, they won't be able to regulate their temperature the same way. And so Inigo's hands were very, very cold. And so we would heat up that little bear with flax seeds in it, and Carly and Inigo would call him Steamy Buns. And it was so fantastic. It would make him laugh. And we just appreciate that you have the ability to do that with kids, Carly.
Thank you. I have two quick things about that is, we noticed, something I noticed with Inigo was before his words even came back from his cerebellar mutism, humor came back first, and his ability to laugh at things came back first. So all I wanted to do was make him laugh at anything that we possibly could. And so in particular, this is oncology talk, but we're having trouble with bowel movements at one point, and then just to make him laugh, we decided to make a song about pooping and put it to the tune of "Bird is the word, is turd is the word," which he found hilarious. So I think that day that's how we found connection without words, even for Inigo. But
yeah. That was great. I remember that. Yeah, really had him laughing.
That was maybe one of our early connections, our first connections. But and then the other
she
thing,
has the gift.
Yeah,
keep it up, Carly, because we know that there are so many other kids there that are appreciating you. Yeah.
I mean,
so just to wrap this up a little bit here, just a few more questions. So in all that we said today, what is the hardest part of your job?
There's a lot of hard parts, but I think the hardest part is loss, is grief. These outcomes that aren't ideal. They're not what you want for the family, or they're not what you want. I don't know. That's the hardest part, is those losses. And for me, and it was recognizing that it's okay to feel those things, to feel grief of a patient. I found myself in therapy saying, I can't say any, who am I to talk? I didn't lose my child. I didn't have this traumatic thing happen to me, but recognizing that there was a loss there. This is a friend. These are people that you've come to care a lot about over a long period of time. Something you spend a lot of days coming home from work thinking about. So that's been my hardest part. But that's probably just personal to me. I think every nurse is a little bit different.
And now, what is your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part, as I think we've alluded to this whole time, is just connecting with patients and families and finding those connections. And we were talking just a couple minutes ago about those connections and how a positive environment is helpful for everyone. But truly, like, as the bedside nurse, we're your advocates. We want what you want. We want not what we think is best, but also what you think is best, and to advocate for that. And so the more that we know what your wants and needs are, the better we can go to bat for you when there's like bigger, higher up conversations with, the attending at this high up level. The better we know you, the more we've connected, we can go in and say, I know this family. I know that this is what they've told me they want, and speak up for those wants and needs. And it's all about connecting. And hopefully sometimes it's through art, which is also my favorite.
Carly, thank you so much. We just appreciate you as a person beyond being an amazing nurse. Whether you were Inigo's nurse or not, and you would come into that room to see us, your eyes were always looking to see what Inigo might need. And that's a wonderful, wonderful trait that you have, and we would hope that most nurses have. But it's this definite connection and understanding of your patients. Now, I understand neuro-oncology is different. You guys have us long term. You have the time to get to know who we are. You know the things that we need. But I'm talking about medically. You would cue in on things, and you would say, "Oh, hey, do you guys need this?" And you understood. You and Lindy had a great connection because you understood she was a nurse, and you guys speak a different language. I don't speak what you guys speak. So it was just good to see how you were not afraid to step in to fill needs, to fill Inigo's needs. And that was a really wonderful experience. I mean, we were just walking through one day. We were on our way to Jimmy's. We decided to stop, and you looked at Inigo, his complexion, and you said, I have some thoughts on, do you guys know
Your
what
color.
Inigo's numbers are?
Yeah.
And so it was one of those things, like, here we were, not even on the floor. And
You're really pale, buddy.
and there was this instant, like, I think you guys need to check on that. And sure enough, we checked on that, and I think we were impatient like 2 days later or something.
Needed some blood and some other things.
Yeah. So it was it's amazing how in your mind there's a checklist that goes off. And what we loved was that part of your medical checklist was an emotional connection checklist. And that's why we have you on today, because we think it's really special, the type of nursing that you do, where it's an emotional connectivity. It allowed Inigo to feel happy and safe in your space. And that was to the very end. I think what parents won't understand is that as you get to the end of your child's cancer journey, if your child is going to lose their life to this, the end obviously is not pretty, but the behavior is going to also not look like something that you're used to with your child. And I took it upon myself to, oh no, I need to apologize for Inigo saying certain things at the very end. Oh, Carly, I'm so sorry he said that to you. And Carly would just look at me and say, I know that's not him. Don't worry about it. And for me, that was so freeing because I knew that wasn't him either. But still, as a parent, you still walk through life like, oh no, my child is acting in a way that I'm not used to, that I didn't raise him like. Also understanding that it's because there are things going on, in particular with Inigo, chemical imbalances from a brain tumor and these sorts of things that were important for us as parents to understand. And yet you as a nurse and having the connection, the emotional connection with him that you had and with us, you could reach out to us and say, you don't have to apologize. It's okay. Like, this is okay. This is what happens. And I know that's not him. And I know outwardly you say that. But I know inwardly these things do affect you all too.
Yeah. Yeah. In different, in different ways. I think one time Inigo was so frustrated that I forget what he said, but I caught myself like maybe getting emotional in that moment. But I was more emotional about the fact that maybe I knew how things had progressed, and maybe a little less about like, I'm so offended that he just said this to me. It was more like, I'm recognizing that we're at the point now where he isn't communicating the way that he was when he was a healthy, kid. So sometimes you have to catch yourself as the nurse being, emotional about things.
Yeah.
But it's all.
You're gifted. I don't know how you do it, but it's oh man, I just felt so bad for you guys at the end, because I was so scared that you guys had loved us so much and had become so connected with us at the end that you all were going through emotional things that made me so scared for you. And it's difficult because I understand that you take this on. You decide to do this. But I think just as somebody with empathy, it affected me to know that you guys were going to deal with this in a very heavy way. So yeah, we appreciate what you all do. We appreciate the care that you give to us. And we appreciate the emotional connection that you gave to us and to Inigo at the end. Not even at the end, all throughout the story. I mean, the art connection that you had with Inigo was awesome. And so once again, to reiterate to parents, you will have particular nurses that are emotionally connected with you, emotionally connected to your child. Don't be afraid of that. Allow it to happen. Allow your children to know that your nurses are a safe space, and pray for a nurse like Carly. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Thank you.
Carly, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you very much, and please continue to do the work that you do. It is needed. It is noble, and we thank you for it. And Inigo just appreciated you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Carly.
That was our show for today. Thank you for joining the conversation. We hope that in listening to our conversations, you will be able to glean information that can be useful for you. If you find that the Love is the Cure Foundation's podcast would serve someone you know, please share our content and support our cause. Our desire at the Love is the Cure Foundation is to help children and families as they navigate a pediatric brain tumor diagnosis. Our experience is with Inigo's brain cancer diagnosis. Some of our conversations may be specific to brain cancer and the residual effects. That being said, through these conversations, we hope to impart practical information that may be useful to a family that may need it as they journey with their child through a pediatric cancer diagnosis, brain cancer or otherwise. Our conversations will continue as we speak with people from different disciplines within hospitals and other cancer situations. We are a nonprofit charitable organization. If you would like to donate to help the Love is the Cure Foundation, please go to our website, loveisthecurefoundation.org, where you can donate and also read about our story and the outreach that we are doing at the foundation. Thank you. And as we say here at the Foundation, go love on someone. We all need it.